Our customers, we know that.
This has been a very unpleasant day for the TTC and the TTC riders.
This is the third day. I'm just tired of this.
So we were stuck in tunnels.
This is like a little ridiculous.
This was the scene this morning for multiple subway transit commuters. A signal issue resulted in staircase, escalators, platforms of passengers packed to the brim. These are just some of the images at Bay Station, St. Clair West and St. George. Major and Gabriel were outside of Museum Station. This is where the signal issue at track level took place today, creating yet another day of commuter chaos for TTC riders. It's been a rough week for the TTC. They've had multiple issues, though the images you just saw are sparking serious safety concerns. Today, I spoke with transit expert Murtaza Haider. He believes we're on the brink of what could be a fatal incident. He's calling for safety audits to be done at all subway stations, and he also says diversion plans for passengers when there are shutdowns like we saw today need to happen immediately.
We shouldn't wait for the accident to happen. We are one step away from a disaster in such kinds of extreme crowding. Start focusing on safety audits for commuters who are crowded on platforms, on staircases. You look at the pictures. TTC has all the cameras. They can look at the level of crowding that they saw today. It requires a diversion plan. It requires systems in place to prevent that kind of crowding from happening. Shut the doors down. Shut the doors down to the transit stations if you know that the crowding would be in excess of permissible limits.
I would put that position in place. We would close down a station before we'd let it get unsafe. The system went fail-safe this morning. So the concept of the system almost being unsafe is untrue.
How can you say the pictures and the images that we saw today on platforms was safe?
Very crowded platforms, right? And what we do is we put station staffing there to do observations, and when necessary we shut down the escalators so that no one can get caught on an escalator. We'll put people upstairs and restrict people from coming in stations.
Did that happen today?
It happens when these type of incidents occur. That's what happens.
So did it happen today, though, that the escalators were shut down?
No, my understanding is that all they do is slow down the trains on line 2 so we didn't put too many people into line 1.
We also brought the safety concerns to the attention of Mayor John Tory today. Is it time that we have safety audits done at our subway stations, and why aren't diversion plans in place for days like today?
I think the real problem is diversion to where? Because that is what decades of underinvestment in transit have produced. The bottom line is, whatever the explanation is, it is something that nobody should be satisfied with, starting with me and going through the executives of the TTC and the board. And so I know that once they get that explanation, they will look at it very carefully, and I'll want to see it too, because I'm not satisfied with these kinds of things.
The city announced in 2013 that it was spending hundreds of millions of dollars to upgrade the signal system on our subway tracks. Just last year, there were 42 planned full weekend closures with no service along portions of the subway lines. Much of the work has been done, though Museum Station, where the issue took place today, won't have new signals in place until this spring. Now, the issue at track level today is somewhat complex. In short, an insulator with one of the switches malfunctioned and needs to be fixed. A temporary fix is in place for the evening commute this hour. A more permanent one will be put in overnight by crews. Now, today we also heard from the mayor that this highlights a need for more service, a downtown relief line, though something like that is still at least a decade away, and that's dependent on funding from all levels of government. Ahead on City News, we're going to look at some solutions that can help transit riders in situations like we saw today get around much more easier. We'll have that for you at about 6:30. For now, I'm going to send it over to Erica Natividad. She's at City Hall, where there was a TTC board meeting today, and go figure, they're also talking about a fare hike. Earlier on City News, we showed you these images of packed subway platforms, stairwells, and escalators following some major signal issues this morning that left the TTC and its passengers scrambling once again. One thing we heard today from Mayor John Tory is this highlights the issue for expansion of our transit system, things like the downtown relief line, though that is at least a decade away, and it's still dependent on funding from all levels of government. Some passengers we've spoken with say while expansion is important, they want to know what can be done today when there's system breakdowns to help them get from A to B in a timely manner. I spoke with transit expert Murtaza Haider today. He suggests that on days when we have extreme weather, they should already have shuttle buses running up and down transit routes, subway routes, just like this, in the event that there is a system breakdown.
Why wait for the system to break down and then bring in redundancy? Be proactive about it. For instance, when there's a breakdown, you say, well, the buses will start running. No, don't do that. Start operating redundant bus service when you know that the odds of a failure are higher. You know, between minus 30 degrees Celsius, right, or minus 20 degrees Celsius and minus 5 degrees Celsius, you know that the odds of a failure are higher on days when it's minus 20. And you also know that minus 20 is not something that happens every day in Toronto. So when you know that the weather would be bad, and that would too, for just a few days, put the redundant bus service in play already, so not to wait for the system to break down. So thus giving the commuters a choice, so that if they want to avoid the TTC subway system, fearing a breakdown, can still use surface transit buses.
So since last year, we've actually been doing that. When we know inclement weather is happening, we automatically bring an additional 50 to 100 buses scheduled for the next morning to put them where we know they're going to be needed. So we've taken that initiative.
Then how do we see the dangerous crowds today on platforms?
You know, bringing them in today with the warm weather, all right, we still distribute the buses throughout the system. It's getting them to the location when something happens.
So we didn't have them today?
We had extra buses, but not enough for that particular area, not knowing it at the time it occurred.
The issue was here at Museum Station, and it was because of a faulty insulator for one of the signals. It's received a temporary fix for the evening commute, though I'm told some crews will be coming in overnight to put a more permanent fix in place. Now, we had multiple subway shutdowns, dozens of subway shutdowns over the last year alone, as they put in new signals at subway stations across the city. Unfortunately, Museum hasn't been done yet. We're told it should be all complete by this spring.